This is Beyond the Resume, the podcast that brings you the stories, advice, and insights behind some of the most successful people in real estate. Beyond the Resume is brought to you by Jackson Lucas Executive Search, the industry leader in human capital solutions. Here is Chris Papa and Lisa Flicker.
David Kramer, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you here. And I feel like this is going to be a very interesting podcast because not only can we talk to you about how you built a very successful career, but I'm definitely interested in talking about those photographs behind you and the sabbatical that you took, because I think there are a lot of folks who are at a certain point that think about things like that. So excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us, David.
This is going to be an epic podcast episode.
Yeah,
we're swinging for the fences here. Let's make this a top Beyond the Resume podcast episode.
It's going right to the charts, right to the number one. David, thanks for coming on. Everyone knows that the Hudson Companies they really shaped the New York skyline. But let's go back to when
everybody
knows that.
Everyone now knows that. They all know that now.
Everybody knows that.
You know, humbly speaking, not the entire skyline, maybe 60% of it. Yes.
All right. 60.6 rounds up to 1 in my mind, but that's okay. So let's go back to when you were just a dot on the skyline. What did you think you were going to be when you grew up? Did you think this was kind of that you were going to be a real estate developer? Was something you aspired to?
I don't think I knew what real estate was growing up. And in fact, in my college yearbook, they do have future occupation. And I wrote in defensive end, which is a football position on the defensive line. And so I did not become a defensive lineman. So that was
what team? What team were you looking for?
I'm a lifelong Giants fan.
Me too.
I don't think I knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. And then I I was always a generalist. So I always had a lot of interests, high school, college. And then I did a fellowship after college, which was perfect for generalists. It was a 1-year sort of graduate fellowship called the Coro Foundation Public Affairs Program, which sort of shapes and trains future leaders in public affairs broadly defined. Yeah, you could, if you were to ask today, what is public affairs? It could be somebody who's in politics and government, or it could be somebody who does a lot of public-private partnerships and, works on city skylines and everything in between. And so in that Coro Fellowship, which I did in Los Angeles, I had a different job every month. And you work for a union, you work for a nonprofit, you work on a campaign, you work for a business. And I was offered a job during Coro of going to work for Kaufman and Broad, which is a huge single-family home builder in California. And I had no expectations, in Coro about what I was going to do. So that sort of began to guide me. And then the one little green shoot in housing is that when I was in college, I did work on homeless advocacy. The homelessness crisis was really started in the 80s, and I graduated college in 87. So, the word homeless was added to our lexicon in the mid 80s. So, between having some sort of do-gooder instincts, focus on homeless advocacy, out of the blue, getting a job offer from a real estate developer, that began to narrow my focus.
Did you grow up in California?
I grew up on the Upper West Side of New York City. And I thought I was going to do a fellowship for 1 year. I figured, I'm going to be in New York, or I might as well just go see LA for a year with this fellowship. And I ended up staying 8 years.
That's what we do here in New York. We suck you in.
And then when you were doing this, did you have, I guess, what were kind of the key skill sets you learned when you started in real estate? Because I feel like there's probably a lot of people listening who maybe are in college or in their careers, like, man, I would love to get into real estate. How do we even do that? What do I need to know? Like, did you have any skill sets like that or did you have to learn everything on the job besides?
There's the hard skills of real estate, and then there's the soft skills of life. And so I would say that being a generalist, I think, is good as a real estate developer, because as a real estate developer, you're dealing with, all of the grand challenges of life. It's not just architecture. It's not just finance. It's not just marketing. It's not just politics. And so I've always thought that being a generalist was one sort of compatible element of thriving in real estate. We sort of sit at the hub of a whole chaotic circus of different industries. And so you have to know how to talk to the construction workers and what questions to ask when you're looking at construction bids. At the same time, you have to talk to bankers and mayors and prospective homeowners and tenants. So I think that sort of being a generalist served me well. I'm pretty good in math. I'm pretty good as a writer, a pretty good speaker, and all of those things come into play. And then you actually have to learn the meat and potatoes of real estate, which I learned on the job. And today you have real estate majors. I mean, I just spoke at the Shack Institute the other day, and you can major. And I always thought it was like a master's program, but you can major in real estate as an undergrad. That was completely sort of a news to me. So I was an American history major, and so and I don't think there's any one path. You can be very successful as a real estate major. You can be very successful as an American history major. And I sort of think of real estate as the Big Ten, and people come at it from all ways. I think the late Steve Ross started as a tax attorney. So you can come out of government, you can come out of the nonprofit world, you can come out of the finance world. A lot of Hudsonites, we sort of have a civic bend. We do a lot of affordable housing. We do a lot of public-private partnerships. And so a lot of us come out of nonprofits or working for one of the city agencies, EDC, HPD, HDC, or have a planning degree. There was a point in time where like half the people here had a degree from DUSP, which is the MIT planning program.
Right.
In fact, I think I'm one of the only few people here who doesn't have a graduate degree.
Well, I say I wouldn't get hired for my company right now. So
That's the kind of company you want to build, right? That's
Yeah,
the
right.
goal. You build a company that would never hire you.
A company that's too good for you.
Exactly. Exactly. So, it's interesting. Like when you think about, there are a lot of folks in college who listen to the podcast thinking about what they want to be when they grow up. Are there any things about your job today that might have surprised your younger self that you think like, wow, I can't believe this, good or bad, that this is part of my job?
Literally, I think everything. I mean, I have a lot of sort of detailed technical knowledge of construction, of financial strategies that I think would have been very sort of jarring and surprising for college David to hear. Not that college David had any expectations of anything. I was voted my senior class in college most likely to be president and most likely to be indicted for insider trading. I think they had a sense I was like, I could be political, maybe I could be a handshaker, I could also be a little entrepreneurial, maybe crossing the line at times. And so, when you're a little bit of all of that, hopefully not the insider trading, or not the indictment. In real estate,
Right. You don't want to get caught. I mean, it's
never been convicted. I mean, part of being a successful real estate developer is really having insights as to how neighborhoods are evolving, how cities are changing, where one should be developing, what neighborhoods to focus on. We've done a lot of that at Hudson. We've sort of been like the next neighborhood group for decades. A lot of times when I'm interviewing, junior applicants, I'll say to them, if you were us, if you come to work here, what New York City neighborhoods do you think we should focus on that are undervalued? Because frankly, a 23-year-old might have better insights about that now than a crotchety middle-aged guy.
So
well,
yeah,
certainly they think.
Was that?
Good, Chris.
I was going to say, I guess tell what is Hudson today? Like, are you? I mean, I think of you as you're a developer in New York City. I guess kind of you have a full team. You have a property management company. You do construction. You do development. You do. I guess kind of how many people work there? What's the footprint these days?
We do everything except oral surgery. We're 3 companies, 100 people. Hudson is the real estate developer. Broadway Builders is the contractor. Visa Management's the property management company. And we are New York City focused. We did exclusively New York City for probably 35 of our 40 years. And recently we've begun to tiptoe to contiguous locations. We have 2 new ground up rental buildings in Westchester, one in Pelham and one in Portchester. We have a new affordable senior project in Paterson, New Jersey. And New York City is becoming more and more challenging to develop. If I could do everything in New York City, I would, but it's a little harder these days. And I sort of have a personal theory that I want to be able to drive to all of my sites. And unless we were sitting around twiddling our thumbs and weren't busy enough, we could get on planes and trains and look farther afield, as many of my friends, allies, and competitors have all looked at everything from Atlanta to Florida to Detroit. And I tend to want to stay local. I think in my 30 years at Hudson, maybe I've taken 6 or 7 business trips. So, we're truly local yokels. And when you're developing New York City, oftentimes the conferences come to you. And so I have had very little reason to travel. And therefore, when I do partake in business travel, I find it incredibly disorienting. Like, I'm sure everybody else does it way more than me. So this sounds like I'm totally soft. But, you go away and your emails pile up and the laundry piles up and the dogs want to know where you've been. And so we've sort of tried to keep it local this whole time, as long as we can stay busy and profitable.
Right. And there's enough here, right? And New York is a usually busy enough city that you can kind of keep yourself going.
That's fine.
I like it. So tell me a little bit about a day in the life of David Kramer. What is it like to be you? What do you do? Wake up?
You hang out near Adams all day. God, what else? Yeah.
You have a dog or two, it sounds like.
I was with the mayor today and my 2 dogs. So yes. That basically sums it up. It's almost too glamorous to tell, but let's give it a try. I'm a huge puzzler, crossword puzzles, Wordle, can. So when I wake up in the morning, I do 2 can puzzles because it wakes me up. And so that's my transition. Mornings, I'm either working out or walking the dogs or both. I have 2 dogs, Brooklyn, New York. I'd say my work hours are probably like 9:30 to 7, more or less. And there's more work to do. There's, nights and weekends. And that a typical day is sort of mixed between being in my Union Square office or being out at sites. Right now, we are off the charts busy compared to our historic averages. We have 8 projects under construction. And so there's always someplace I could be besides my office, whether it's a construction site, or looking at, different, potential sites, for the next generation. What I like about being a real estate developer on a day-to-day basis is every hour is different. 1 hour could be spent looking at a spreadsheet. The next hour could be spent picking out, tile colors. The third hour could be spent strategizing about a community meeting coming up. The way I like to say it, because nobody quite knows what a real estate developer does. You say you're a real estate developer. I'm like, are you the architect? No. Are you the builder? No. Well, sort of another company is. And so I like to say is that from the period of, like, let's say you buy a parking lot and 3 or 4 years later, there's an apartment building sitting there. There's probably 1,000 decisions that had to be made. Everything from sort of threshold issues of, is this going to be a rental or a condo or a hotel or a homeless shelter? Is it going to comply with zoning? Or are we going to go for discretionary approvals? Are we looking to sell $3 million condos or $500,000 condos? Even to, should our 2 bedrooms be 1,100 square feet or 900 square feet? What's the audience? And so there's literally 1,000 decisions along the way. And the real estate developer is the one who really guides the process, hires everybody from the contractor to the architect to the brownfield tax credit attorney, interest to the bank. And so you have to understand that process from top to bottom. You have to understand the entire picture before you even bid on the land, because how do you know how much the land is worth unless you've already sort of have a very, very clear idea about, what the next 4 years are going to be like. And so it's always varied. It's gotten a lot tougher. It's a little less fun than it used to be. I don't know if everybody hates developers more now than in the good old days, but, if you look at like the New York City mayor's race that's winding up, you still have candidates who don't take real estate money, which, always irks me to no end, because there's no other industry where I'm just making a blanket decision not to take any money from an industry, it's because it's I'm a big fan of nuance. There are good guys and bad guys, whether you are a baker, a candlestick maker, or a real estate developer. And so the politics are changing a little bit with the abundance agenda you read about and the YIMBY world, but it's still hard. Nobody wants to see development next to them. Everybody wants cheaper rents. Nobody wants construction in their neighborhood. So it's still a bit of a challenge.
And you're providing affordable, like mainly a lot of it's affordable. So it's like you get pushed back in certain neighborhoods, like, yeah, you know, not in my backyard type of thing. Is that still the New York sort of, what's the sentiment in New York as to like new housing?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We do about half market rate and half affordable. So when you're going through approvals, you get very little pushback on affordable projects. Now, usually that's because the affordable projects are not, you know, on Park Avenue next to a fancy condo. Because when you're looking to buy affordable land to do an affordable housing project, it's typically in neighborhoods that are not as prime. And the politics are such that everybody loves affordable housing. So when we take projects through and they're affordable, there's much less resistance. When I started my career in LA, anytime you did affordable housing, people went bonkers. I think it's a little more accepted into the fabric of New York City, affordable housing. The one affordable project where we had a lot of pushback is we're building a homeless shelter on West 59th Street. And it's next to a condo. It's next to a playground. This is a single women's shelter. So you'd think that as shelter populations go, that would be considered a little more acceptable for West 59th Street. And still we had the rallies and all sorts of details like, this is where everybody's going to come out and smoke, and the smoke's going to travel to the playground. So please place your homeless shelter somewhere else. You know, in the city, in their defense, one of the reasons they want to do a homeless shelter on West 59th Street is that they want to sort of spread these resources so that not everything is in, you know, South Bronx or East Brooklyn, and you know, every sort of neighborhood has its share. So in New York, politically, what's much harder now is luxury. So you know, the politicians don't want fancy housing. There's not political support for it. So, you know, we did a project 7 or 8 years ago that I thought was going to be, you know, akin to, what was it like when I think it was George W. Bush said, when we go into Iraq, we're going to be treated as liberators. You know, I sort of thought we were going to be treated as liberators. We were building a new building, but it was going to include a new library for the Brooklyn Public Library. We were giving them a lot of money for the land that they were going to use to then subsequently renovate 7 or 8 libraries. We were building a STEM lab for the Board of Ed. There were a lot of good things coming out of it. We were building affordable housing, and I thought we'd be sort of, you know, greeted as liberators. But the bulk of the project was high-end condos and, you know, in a sort of tall, sexy building. And, you know, people went crazy. And it was a very high profile, controversial project, the library project. And we freaked out of victory because we threw enough goodies at it that it was hard to turn down when you have, you know, new libraries, new STEM labs, and affordable housing. But it was close. And that's where I wear my real estate hat as campaign manager, because we were in a campaign against community oppositions, library crazies, construction unions,
Yeah.
public school parents, using the hearings as an opportunity to advocate for their public school. You know, it can get pretty bonkers. And as a businessman, you want certainty. When you go into these projects, you want to know that, like, you want to know what the rules are. And as long as you know what the rules are, you'll abide by the rules, whatever they are. And in this case, you know, when you're going for discretionary approvals in the city of New York, there are no rules.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. A lot of our clients are either like develop outside of New York or they develop inside New York. You know, there's not like that's kind of like, and the ones that go in New York don't do a lot outside and vice versa. I guess,
Yeah,
what does it take besides, I don't know, what's it take to get a deal done in New York successfully?
You know, now that we've done 2 deals in Westchester, and one in New Jersey, you know, there are parts of New York that you come to appreciate. Because for the most part, New York is as of right zoning, which most places outside of New York don't have. Outside of New York, a lot of places you have to get site plan approval, you have to get a tax deal, all that sort of pre-baked into the New York City fabric. And so what's hard to make a deal work in New York is to find a deal that works economically between like how land is priced and how much construction costs are and what you think the rents are going to be. You know, if it were easy, 17 people would be bidding on each site. So everything is priced in such a way that you have to be a little nutty or a little optimistic to proceed. Once you leave New York City, it's risky in a whole different way, and which is why some of my brethren are going to sort of the blue enclaves in the red states where there's less regulation, where there's less regulatory approvals. You look at a place like Houston. Now, there are downsides to that level of freedom, which is that Houston is now oversupplied. You have a lot of sort of low barrier to entry areas that are now oversupplied. Rents going down. You'll never have that in New York. New York right now is not building nearly enough housing. And the new 45X tax plan that was approved by the state legislature in, I guess it was June of 24, is not doing anybody any favors. So, and rents could not be higher in New York City. So you need to build a lot more housing in New York to try and keep rents at any sort of conventionally normal level. And that's not what's happening right now.
Well, there's an expression: you don't ask a question you don't know the answer to, and I'm gonna break that because
Go for it.
I'm gonna go for it, and we'll see what happens. I could always edit out your answer. We have a lot of students who are listening who are potentially going to get into real estate. They're interested in real estate. If you could go back to when you were 20, would you go into real estate? Would you do it differently, knowing what you know now?
That doesn't sound like such a scary question.
Okay, good. Well, but if you said don't go into real estate, I feel like I'd have to edit that.
Absolutely, I would encourage people to go into real estate. I find, I'm an urbanist. I've been a lifelong city dweller, and I find the issues that real estate development deals with, to be fascinating. Everything from housing issues, livability issues, pedestrian issues. Being a real estate developer is as close to like being a mayor of a small town as possible without having to run for election and knock on doors. Because you're dealing with so many different elements, and you're helping to shape how the city is experienced. And you don't have that sort of digital AI downside that we're going to get replaced by bots and ChatGPT. Like, you still need housing, you still need to build. So I think it's a terrific career. It's not for everybody. And also, there's so many different elements to it. You could be a developer. You could work on housing policy for the city. You can be on the finance side or the tax credit side on the, for affordable housing. There's a lot of industries and submarkets within real estate. So I don't think there's anything going on today that would discourage, youth from getting into it at all.
What is your favorite part of your job?
I think the initial excitement about a new project is the best high you're going to get. And because at the end of at the end of the job, when you've sold your last unit, at that point, you've sort of already checked out, you've already emotionally moved on. There are a few moments where you get a real contact high on a project. And usually the first one is when you make a deal with the seller and you have a sense of like where you're going to go with it. And you may have out hustled some other prospective buyers or bidders. And we do a lot of stuff with the city and state where there's RFP. So it gets selected for an RFP. That's a big high. And so sort of envisioning the project, coming up with the sort of financial feasibility, bidding on it, trying to get it. I think that is a very exciting part of the job. And oftentimes what happens is after that, you're then left with, 4 to 5 years of, slogging it out and, getting through everything else. In fact, we have a bell here at Hudson Companies. I'm pointing to it right now. And because, a development project can take 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah. And as you alluded to a little while ago, I was at a ribbon cutting that Mayor Adams came to join for a project that closed. It was phase 2 of a project that we were designated by Mayor Michael Bloomberg in 2013. So it's 11 and a half years later, where we just closed on phase 2. So now we have another 2.5 years of construction after that. And so, you sort of have to play the long game. You have to be patient. And so what we do with the bell is anytime there's a good benchmark moment, we will ring the bell. If we sign a contract to acquire a new site, we'll ring the bell. If we get our financing in order, we close on construction finance and start on construction, we ring the bell. When we get our temporary certificate of occupancy and the first people can move in, we ring the bell. because these can be long processes. You want to experience joy throughout. You don't want to wait till the end, as the saying goes, don't postpone joy. But so to answer your question, Chris, I think it's the initial excitement. Or I could parrot Frank Lloyd Wright, who answered that question by saying, no, I'm sorry, that was a different thing. Frank Lloyd Wright was asked, what's your favorite project? And his response was the next one.
Yeah.
It's the same concept. Frank and I have a similar vibe.
I like that. So we were able to sit with you right before you left for your sabbatical, your post-empty nest sabbatical, but we haven't really been able to catch up on all of the details. Would love to hear two things. One, just what inspired you to do it, what you took away from it, but also, and I guess this is three things, there are a lot of people who are younger in their careers and they talk about like, well, how do I find my spark? How do I find my joy? I think that as you get further on, you just accept that you are who you are and you're doing what you're doing. Do you think that traveling changed any of the ways that you lead or manage your business?
Okay.
Four-part question. Go.
So the backstory is that I took over as the main Hudson partner maybe 14 years ago. And it was at the exact same time that we were getting institutional capital. We had been more of a mom and pop operation until then. And we had to check all these boxes and provide all of these materials that we hadn't had before. And one of the things they asked for was our employee handbook. So we were like, fuck, we need a handbook.
Yeah.
And so it was a chance for me as sort of like the new go-to guy to think about like, what are the values I'd like to instill in this company that play out through the guidelines and policies for personnel. And one of the things that came up was parental leave. And when you start as a company, like Hudson was started by three guys in 1986. I joined 9 years later. When you start a company, there's no employee handbook. There's no parental leave. I think when I had three kids while I was a partner at Hudson. I think, the most I took was like a week. So then when it came down to like my coming with a parental leave policy for Hudson, I came up with something which at the time I think was considered bold and daring and progressive. I think the world has caught up to us now. It's not so bold, daring, progressive. And I think the tech world has way, way outshone us. But at the time, it was 3 months paid for everybody, moms and dads, an additional 9 months unpaid with your job guaranteed. People really loved and appreciated. Like, I don't think paternal leave was really accepted so much when I came up with this policy 12 or 13 years ago. In fact, I asked some of my friends who work at, sort of well-known developers what their, parental leave policy was, particularly if they were dads. And they're like, long weekend if we're lucky kind of thing. And so it was a big success. The women really appreciated the fact that they felt less guilty because they knew like, not only were they taking it, but the dads were also taking it. So everybody filled in for everybody else. But what I took from it for the next 12 years, seeing literally everybody in this company take 3-month parental leave, and in some cases multiple times. I have people here with 3 kids who took parental leave each time. But one of the lessons for me was that incredibly valuable colleagues of mine could disappear for 3 months and we were fine. Everybody considers themselves indispensable and irreplaceable. But the truth is that most people aren't. We've lost some great people and some great partners at Hudson along the way, and we still keep, keep slugging. And particularly in a 3-month period, people cover for you. Some decisions you could kick the can down the road. Sometimes things fall through the cracks, but it's not the end of the world. And so my partner, Sally, who I think and I, who sort of missed the window on generous Hudson parental leave policy, we started joking like, when do we get our parental leave policy? So the thought started forming that when I became an empty nester, that would be a good time. My youngest, when my youngest was in high school, I was going to be like, see you fella, best of luck. And, thanks to the wife for raising him. I'm off to climb Kilimanjaro. So my vision was that when I was an empty nester, that would be a good time to do my version of a parental leave. I've been an empty nester since my youngest went off to freshman year, fall of 23. So I think by like spring of 24, I started plotting and looking around, thinking that the coast was clear. There were no insurmountable issues that I had to stick around for. And I sort of put together, sort of my bucket list of like things I wanted to do. My wife I ended up doing it like fall of 24. So like 8 months ago. My wife was very involved with the election. She was very involved in projects. So I knew it wasn't going to be a joint sabbatical, but she met me along the way. And what I wanted to do, as you can see from the photos behind me, is the theme was like rigorous outdoor activities in beautiful locations. And it's because I find that in my later years, when I go on vacation, I prefer mountains and valleys and hikes and lakes to cities. Having just described myself as an urbanist, I feel like that's my day job. And so I'm a little less excited these days walking around London and Paris for vacation, as opposed to Scottish Highlands, which I was just in, or say Kilimanjaro. So I put together a 4-month itinerary, and my friends and family signed up for different slots. And I'd say the first 2/3 immediately were filled up. I walked the Camino de Santiago in Spain with my daughter, which I highly recommend. I was out west with my son, my brother, my wife, close friends. I met my college roommates in Ireland for a week. I met my wife in Venice. But then the two things that I did by myself were I did go to Kilimanjaro in Tanzania and climb that for a week. And then I went off to New Zealand for 3 weeks of day hiking. So all in all, it was everything I had planned. It was beautiful. Every day I woke up sort of appreciative that like I wasn't sort of tied to my phone checking emails. And I had like weekly check-ins with my team, but that sort of faded over time as they sort of got used to my absence. And then to get to your other question, Lisa, like what did I learn and did it, change my view? My answer is like a Seinfeld episode. There was no morals. There was no lessons. I literally, came back and everybody was like, so, what were the epiphanies? And the answer was like, no, I like my life now. I liked my life then. I wasn't looking for epiphanies. I wasn't burnt out. I literally did this because I could. It was like, I just sort of as an extended vacation. The truth is that like, you don't really go away for more than 2 weeks in the modern world. So if you want to go to Japan or New Zealand and it takes, 36 hours to get there each way, like it's really hard to do anything it's really hard to do a bunch of things if you're only gone for 2 weeks. And if you're gone for 2 weeks, it takes you 6 days to relax. And then, you limited time thereafter. I did it, it was a luxury, but I wasn't looking for career insights. And I think everybody was a little disappointed that I came back and it was as if I was gone for a long weekend. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to roll up the sleeves and let's get back to what we were doing before.
And everyone's waiting for the words of wisdom.
Exactly.
Did you have withdrawal? I would tell you, when I go on vacation the first 4 days, if I'm trying not to work, it's like withdrawal from like my phone.
What happened is I told my staff that I wasn't going to be looking at emails, and we created a new email address for me, DK Sabbatical. So that was like the bat phone. And, I get probably 400 emails a day. So usually on vacation, it takes you a while to wean yourself off the emails. And you have to make sort of a threshold decision on vacation. Do you ignore the 400 emails a day at your peril and then come back to 2,000 emails in your inbox? Or do you skim them? In which case, like 3 times a day, you get anxious and uptight about some problem. And then you're also dealing with the obligation to return certain emails. So I told my staff I wasn't looking at emails. And so it was amazing. On day 1, I was free. And my voicemail in my office phone said, I'm on sabbatical. I'm back December 2nd. I'm not checking voicemails. So when I got back, I had one voicemail in 4 months. So I had successfully discharged everybody. So I think that, everybody knows, even if you're on vacation, they expect that you're keeping an eye on email. So this was like a different category. I was on sabbatical. I wasn't checking emails. People were trying to leave me alone. And it was immediately freeing.
Right. And I'm sure when you go on vacation for a week or two, people are just kind of waiting for you to get back. But they had to fill in those gaps because you weren't coming back so quickly.
David, you just mentioned your bucket list. So you're going to be really excited because here's another thing on your bucket list. You've just entered the hot seat.
Oh! I'm sure that's on your bucket list.
My friend,
Chris and Lisa's.
This is the moment I've been waiting for.
We spoke to everyone who was on your trip, and we said, what was missing?
Real estate developers in New York City live their lives on the hot seat. So this is no different than how I spend my 3 o'clock hour.
Yeah, for a New York City developer, this will be a
Okay.
walk in the park.
Hit me.
So start out easy. Do you have any book or podcast recommendations? Anything that's on your nightstand right now that you'd recommend?
You mean beyond the resume as podcast?
Obviously.
Of course.
So I read a lot, both fiction and nonfiction. Let's see, my last great nonfiction book I read was the Doris Kearns Goodwin memoir about the 60s and her husband, Richard Goodwin. And she's like an LBJ advocate and he's a Kennedy advocate. It's called An Unfinished Love Story. Great nonfiction book. What was the last good fiction book I read? I loved The Bee Sting last year. I loved How to Read a Book. So those are some recommendations. And then my all-time favorite podcast is Heavyweight.
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's about
You guys
Hulk Hogan.
wow, you guys don't know you're a Heavyweight podcast, huh? Look
What
it
is
up.
it?
It's fantastic. It's been on hiatus, but it's coming back. There's been 7 or 8 seasons of it. And it is a very entertaining narrator who every episode helps sort of the episode's protagonist go back and try and provide closure on something that happened in their lives that has turned into a heavy weight around, that's been an issue in their lives. Highly recommend Heavyweight. And actually, I used to listen to a lot more newsy podcasts, but since the 24 election, I've been purposely avoiding some of that stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. What is you've done a lot of deals. What has been your most memorable deal? One that stands out to you?
I think that, I have like a good final 4, but to answer your question, I've been pretty actively involved on Roosevelt Island for 28 years.
Wow.
Where Hudson and Related as co-JV partners built an entire neighborhood. We ended up building 10 new buildings. We operate a lot of the retail on the island. And so as a quarter century development, that's been a highlight. And it turned out great. We built beautiful buildings. We did well. We improved the island. So we're proud of what we did.
I've always wanted to take the gondola over there. I've never done that.
The tram.
The tram. Yeah. And
yeah, the tram is in the news as we speak, because in the new TikTok world, there have been so many fun videos of people taking the tram that it's so popular that residents get to the tram to go home, or if they have a doctor's appointment, or they have to meet their kids, or they have to cook dinner, and there's a 45-minute wait of tourists trying to get on the tram. And so the residents are now lobbying the governor to provide sort of a separate, expedited entrance to the tram for residents. And again, that's like, as a real estate developer, I find all of those sort of transportation, government, neighborhood issues really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So Chris, please come visit us on Roosevelt Island, take the tram, but please take the tram during non-peak
off hours. Yes, you got it.
Well, come to town. We'll go for a ride on the tram together, the 3 of us. So I'm sure you've hired a tremendous amount of people. Is there anything beyond the resume that you look for when you're hiring someone?
Yeah, I mean, the resume is just the start. So I like throwing a lot of curveball questions the applicant's way to see how they sort of respond and shift. And in fact, I do my own version of what you call the bucket list hot seat. I call the lightning round. And I'm just sort of curious to see what their answers are, how quickly they respond. For example, I'll throw in a math question. They have to do like some multiplication in their head. And that's always fascinating because you see people completely melt down, which is not a good sign, because, you have to be pretty adept in math in this business. I'll ask them also, sort of current events questions to get a sense of how tapped in they are. If you're a real estate developer, you should know what's going on with the New York City Council, or who the borough president is, or who the who some of the stakeholders are. So, for example, this is one of my favorite memories. I was asking a young woman who was just out of college. I said, "Can you name a New York City mayor before Giuliani?" Thinking like I was curious to, she was born and bred in New York. I was curious to see like how much New York City history she knew. I'm more connected to people who I feel are more connected to their city's civic history. Because a lot of people aren't. A lot of people might be like desperate to be developers, but they have no idea, they can't name the city council speaker. And so I prefer people who know who the city council speaker is. So I asked her, I said, can you name a mayor before Giuliani? And she thought about it and she said, Coke, which was very cute. I'll explain why that's funny to your listeners. She had seen his name in newspaper articles, and it's Koch. And those of us who know about the Koch family, which is, good right-wing activists, Koch is pronounced Koch, but in fact, our mayor was Koch. But anyway, I appreciate.
How am I doing?
So I did appreciate the fact that she knew enough to have seen the name in print.
That's pretty good.
Pronounced.
That's pretty good. Now we know we don't do our lives by ourselves. There's no self-made man type of thing. Which mentors have helped you the most along the way?
Well, I thought this was a chance for me to give a shout out to my wife.
Go for it. That's what I'm doing.
Well, I can start with that. I think that I am more successful because of my wife, because I think she really kept the pressure on me to be successful. I think she had higher hopes for me than I did. I was not as focused on financial success. And I'm glad she was, and I'm glad that, we've been financially successful. So I give her all the credit for sort of keeping me honest. When we moved back to New York, I'd worked for nonprofits, and I'd been perfectly happy working for nonprofit housing groups. And she made it clear that my nonprofit days were over if we were going to live in New York City and raise a family. And so I think mentor wise, I had a great mentor out of Coro, who was one of the great public affairs leaders in Los Angeles. He's a real civic leader, a great generalist, super smart. And he really was a great role model in my early 20s.
Love that. David, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It has been an honor to get to know you better and to learn more about you. And even though you don't have any epiphanies from your trip, we'll forgive you.
Thanks for having me. And let me just say, this was not solicited, but Hudson Companies has worked with Jackson Lucas, and you guys are terrific. And we've had great searches with you guys. And so we appreciate your work in improving the New York City industry.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that.
Thank you. That does mean a lot.
You really upset Julio. Julio, what do you think of that?
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Resume, a Jackson Lucas podcast where we take a deep dive into the career journeys of some of the top minds in real estate and equip you with the knowledge to move forward in your path towards the success you've envisioned. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond the Resume. Be grateful for your support. All episodes of Beyond the Resume are brought to you by Jackson Lucas, building inclusive and diverse businesses through talent acquisition. Visit us at jacksonlucas.com.